and making some form of a contribution in this fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. We never like to miss out anyone, but recently I've heard two organizations or entities would have come in and made some contribution. The cancer support group have come out and have made a very valuable contribution in terms of masks to workers in the field who are working with the cases, and in general to give some protection. And what is so incredible is that these people, having their own fight to tangle with, are yet coming out and making a contribution in this fight against the COVID-19 virus. It is so commendable that in all the difficulties they're having with their own members, their own society, that they have come out and stepping up to the plate in this fight against the COVID-19 virus. And for all those people out there who are suffering from cancer, whatever form or the other, we do hope that your treatment is a success and your health gets back to normal. The good folks from the Top Banana too, they have come out and they have given quite a number of cases of bananas to the agency which is at the forefront and helm of this fight against the COVID-19 virus. And to anyone or any person or entity or organization out there who has made any contribution in the past week or so, we certainly, from this table, are expressing tremendous thanks and appreciation for your efforts. All those families who have a member or members who are afflicted by this COVID-19 virus, this table and this program, of course, offers you every support in your challenge, in your struggle. The persons who are affected by the coronavirus, whether in isolation or in quarantine, of course, we bring every encouragement, every support, every motivation we can find to help you and to guide you through a trying time. I keep on saying that what you're going through is for the benefit of your country, St. Kitts and Nevis, and the people around you and those who know you should keep on offering you their support, every support that they can. Also, we have to speak over the students who have been back home and who are in quarantine. The last time I was sick, that was Wednesday night. You got in Thursday, so we're basically covering a week now since you've been home. And we're certainly very glad to have you back in St. Kitts and Nevis. And it certainly has to be very wonderful, you being this close to your friends and family. And like I said, we're pretty much past 1 week, and we just have to be patient. And by this time, so next week, we will look into the sunrise on the Thursday morning when everything is equal. You should be with your families. Yeah, we have to thank God that at this moment in time, some 12 of our 15 patients who were diagnosed with the COVID-19 virus have recovered. And we do thank God so very much and so very deeply for that. And we have to thank him too that to this point, none of our citizens here in St. Kitts and Nevis, and in the context of St. Kitts and Nevis, has died due to the COVID-19 virus. I have to take something from GQ, who once worked here and who's on another radio station. He said we should not compare and we should not celebrate But we have to give appreciation and, of course, give thanks to God. And his words, I'm happy to quote them as they are so profound. And my dear people, sometimes we have to make some comparisons to try to show matters, demonstrate matters, and to elucidate situations. You know, a few months ago, some Haitians got to St. Kitts and Nevis on a boat. And the plight of Haitians is well known throughout the Caribbean and throughout the world. You know, apart from that trip to St. Kitts and Nevis, they go on boats and rafts with some very rickety and unseaworthy vessels to get to Florida and those places. And we know in the process, many of them die. But when you look at the corollary, here in St. Kitts and Nevis, we had a number of students out there in Jamaica who, you know, would have been very anxious to be home, and those families certainly would have been glad to have them back at home. And our state and our country undertook the expenditure to bring them all home. So while some people, unfortunately, have to run from their countries, if you may say it that way, we have a government which has spent tremendous amount of money to bring our citizens to the safety and comfort of St. Kitts and Nevis. I must tell you before we go any further that tonight I've got a very special guest here with me in the station. And I'll just make a few further comments and then we get on to a discussion with our guest who has been so kind to grace our presence here tonight. One of the matters which drew my attention over the past days matters relating to the Labor Day issue, where videos were circulating with Dr. Douglas and some members of his party out in the public going contrary to the curfew laws. In fact, it's rather amusing to see that while Dr. Douglas had his mask on, those around him, their faces were not covered. And you know, for a medical doctor to be engaged in this kind of activity, frankly breaking the law and showing a very bad example in a country where we're trying to curb lawlessness, it's rather unfortunate. You know, I have no issue that they were granted permission to go to the cemetery to lay wreaths and pay homage to fallen heroes. I am absolutely comfortable with that. But if you're given that golden inch and you go to take some reckless miles, that's another consideration and a matter that is rather unsatisfactory. But let me repeat, I have no problem absolutely with they being given the time to go and lay wreaths at the Springfield Cemetery at the gravesites of our national heroes. One last thing I'll mention, listen to the BBC News tonight, and this fits in the context of what we've been hearing here in St. Kitts and Nevis, when some people without the consideration for the health of the nation are pushing and arguing to have elections. And of course elections are going to come. There's no effort ongoing to put off the elections for any nefarious purposes. But in Poland, the Polish elections have been put off. They were to be held on Sunday. But quite interestingly, both the government and opposition have come to the conclusion or an agreement that those elections shall be put off for a while. And of course, this is coming in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. And as citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis, we need to look at these situations, make a relevant comparison, and, you know, get an idea of how, you know, countries are affected by this COVID-19 virus. In fact, as I said a while ago, there's an ongoing effort in this country to put off elections for any nefarious or dishonest purposes. It's all a matter that for our citizens, the basic right of life and health are on the line, and every precaution has to be taken to protect our citizens. Now, my dear people, as I said a while ago, I have with me a very special guest in the studio, and if he's ready, I shall announce the person or his name. Tonight we're so thankful and we're glad to have at the table of thought the Honorable Shawn Kenneth Richards. But I'll turn over to him so he can give us some basic introductions in terms of his position in PAM portfolios, etc., and to make an introductory comment.
Good evening, Dr. Warner, and good evening to all listeners of Win FM. This evening, I must say thank you for extending an invitation to me to be here on your program.
Yeah, I'm certainly glad that you could have made it, considering what could be a very busy and active schedule. Thank you so very much.
I have listened to your program many times, and it has always been quite informative, and so I deem it an honor for you to have invited me to share in this program and to speak to the listeners of Win FM. I have always posited that I am a servant of the people, and being a servant of the people, one of the dictates by which I abide is that I should make myself available to the people, to speak to the people, to hear their comments, to answer their questions, and to know what their concerns are.
Well, indeed, so commendable and so responsible of you.
This gives me such an opportunity. As you have asked me to do, I indicate to the listeners that I am the political leader of the People's Action Movement. I am also the current representative for the good town of Sandy Point, as we say, SP, where the best be. And I thank the people of Sandy Point for the last 3 elections putting their confidence in me. And I have no doubt that for the upcoming general election, they will do so once again. I also serve as Deputy Prime Minister and as the Minister with responsibility for education, youth, sport, and culture. It has been a very rewarding experience serving in those different capacities. It has given me ample opportunities to make a difference in the lives of the citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis, and to bring much needed development to the town of Sandy Point. Currently, as we face the COVID-19 pandemic, the education sector, like so many other sectors, has also been put in a state of turmoil. We have never experienced this, at least in my current lifetime, what is happening within education. Throughout the world, schools have been forced to close, and it is no different here in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. Interestingly, just yesterday morning, I joined a UE Zoom meeting, and that meeting reflected on the COVID pandemic. I said to them then, as the chairperson for the Open Campus Committee, the Grant Committee, that the Open Campus, I suppose, is unique in that the Open Campus is accustomed to virtual education. The landed campuses now have to do the very same thing, and I suppose there are lessons which can be learned from the open campuses. Here in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, we are now embarking upon virtual education. Indeed, it is a new experience and one which we will all learn from. However, the Ministry of Education has positioned itself to be able to bring virtual education to all of our students. For those who may not have heard, we have ordered devices which are on island tablets for all those students who indicated that they do not have access to such at their homes.
I'll just ask for a moment, just to make it a formal question, because you've gone into my second question, which is basically telling us about the provisions which are now being made to accommodate the students who cannot attend school in the traditional way. So, you can go on.
Yes. So we have made provisions for those students. Additionally, we have signed an agreement with the internet service providers, that is Digicel, Flow, and the cable, to provide internet services within those homes which are in need of such, in order to facilitate the students being able to log on to the classes. Just yesterday, we saw the reintroduction of schools meals throughout the entire island of St. Kitts, so that those students who are needy, those parents who are out of work and need that assistance in terms of a lunch for their children, that has been provided as of yesterday.
Yeah. Give us some details in terms of the organization. Is there a number to call, a bus that brings around the food? Could you help us along those lines?
The schools meals still has responsibility for preparing the lunches, and then just as would have happened when schools were open, the buses deliver the lunches to the various schools, the primary schools in particular.
Yeah.
However, children attending the secondary schools are still able to benefit from the program, because we have allowed secondary school students, and even if a child is at the early childhood level, the parents can also sign up to receive lunch for those children. Thus far, we have had over 700 students who have signed up and who have taken advantage of the school's meals. Yesterday, for example, I was at the Sandy Point Primary, and I observed parents, students from both the primary and the secondary school coming by to collect a lunch, whether it is for himself or herself, for the children within the homes, or for 1, 2, 3, or however many students.
Okay. So, is there a number that a parent can call?
Yes, we have advised each parent to call either the teacher of the child, the principal for the school, and during the course of last week, we also had the secretaries going into all of the schools, so that if a parent wanted to visit the school to provide the name and the information for that child, the parent was able to do so.
Okay. Let me digress just a wee bit. We're going to get back to the present provisions in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic. But there's a question that has always been on my mind. It's a health question, of course. Since we've provided the facilities at the Basel High School for the students who are once there at Park Range, have we been having any occurrences or reports of students, staff, or auxiliary workers being afflicted by any maladies, any sicknesses?
We have not had one single report coming out of Basti High School since those...
The present facility?
Yes, the present facility, temporary buildings have been erected.
Okay. I'm pretty much very satisfied to hear that coming from the Minister of Education, and therein the solution to a problem which we had at the Basti High School. And that is so commendable that since there's been a transfer of the students into that new facility, all those reports of afflictions and problems are laid to rest. Uh, the other matter which is of so much interest to me, what were the triggers or trigger which inspired or encouraged the present government to get those students out of Jamaica?
The government understands and the government has heard the cries of the students and the parents in terms of the fact that COVID-19, the cases of COVID-19 have been rapidly increasing in Jamaica. Therefore, out of an abundance of caution, to safeguard the health of our students attending school in Jamaica, the government organized a charter flight to bring home those students. And so on Thursday of last week, we had approximately 53 students who returned from Jamaica and who are currently quarantined at the OTI hotel. It came at a cost of 75,000 US or 203,000 EC dollars to the government, but the government sees it as an investment in the health and in the education of our citizens, our students, the future leaders of St. Kitts and Nevis.
So I would say when we make a comparison on the matter I just spoke about, the new Basse High School's facilities, in other words, that was another measure designed to protect the health of our students.
Yes, it was a measure designed to do such.
Okay, certainly wonderful. In terms of the other aspects of your ministry, sports, etc., what's your word to the sporting public at the moment?
My word to the sporting public is that, again, in the best interest of protecting their health, the government has put certain regulations in place, and as a result of those regulations, we have seen a lull in sporting activities. We understand the concerns that some persons may have in terms of the ability to get exercise in such a manner that they were accustomed to doing. However, there are still other avenues for persons to be able to get exercise. It can be done within the comfort of the backyard. I've seen persons going walking. I think basically for the most part it is the contact sports that we are concerned about. What has also been happening, and I must say to you, is that shortly before the COVID-19 pandemic began affecting the citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis, we had begun looking at our national sports policy. COVID caused us to have some meetings virtually. We now have the draft of that particular policy, and so we now will very shortly have a policy that will guide sports here in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. I think that is something that persons within the different sporting fraternities and the general public can look forward to in terms of that national sports policy that will guide not just the government but the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis going forward in terms of the development and the importance of sports. Sports, of course, has a role to play in terms of our health, in terms of our development, in terms of providing us with education opportunities, in terms of scholarships, etc.
Thank you so very much. In the context of students who are in other places around the world, what are the plans and what provisions are there to take care of their needs?
In terms of students attending other universities, once more the government has heard the concerns, the government of the students, of the parents, and so we have sought to address those. What we have done is to make 1,000 EC dollars available to those students who have been financially affected as a result of COVID-19. I repeat, students who have been financially affected as a result of COVID-19. In other words, there are some students who have reached out to the government, indicated that they had a part-time job, which would have assisted them with paying for expenses such as rent, buying food, books, paying some of their bills, etc. And they have lost those jobs. And so those are the persons that are being targeted for this assistance. I want to make that abundantly clear, because there seems to be a notion out there that all students are eligible for this financial assistance coming from the government. It is for those students who have been affected, financially affected by COVID-19.
Well, of course, some students are on full scholarships, so the degree to which they would be affected would be a lot less compared to those who are paying their own fees and having to carry certain responsibilities on their own. But if you had a word to parents and students at this moment while we're trying to cope with this, and I should say at this moment, if you have a call to the program, you can join us and ask your questions. Yes, I was saying, in terms of what word you have for parents and students in this critical time when they have to be locked in, they have to study at home, that kind of situation.
What I would say to parents and students is that while it is that regular classes have been disrupted, that this period provides an opportunity for, in the first instance, for parents and the children to bond, for parents to assist children in terms of home schooling, for students to use this critical time to review what they would have learned over the last 2 terms of school, to take the opportunity to look at what they would have been learning in the upcoming term, which would have already begun as a matter of fact, and to get ahead in terms of their education. It is not a time for students to relax, because at some point in time they would have to return to school. And the more advanced they are, I think the quicker and the easier it would be for teachers to move on in terms of the education of our students and for them to be up to date. In some countries, for example, in Trinidad, the school year has now been extended until December, with the new school year starting next year, January. Of course, that would mean the interruption of a number of other things. Those students, for example, who are hoping to go off to university in September would have to postpone those particular plans. Persons may have made arrangements for travel during the month of December, etc. All those plans, of course, would be affected as a result of those particular decisions. The point that I want to reinforce, though, is that while students are at home, it is important for them to continue their education. In terms of the virtual education here in St. Kitts and Nevis, we have been training our teachers to deliver it, and within a few days, we're to start that process in terms of the delivery of virtual education.
Oh, wonderful. People have, various questions to ask, and one of the things I've heard being asked is that what's the position in terms of 6 exams and government paying for those exams? What are the provisions? How is it going to affect families and students?
The government has been accustomed to paying for the exams for most of the students. That will still continue. What I can say, however, relative to CXC is that CXC has taken a decision in terms of the format of the exams and also the dates for the exams. SBAs, which mostly would have been due by now.
Give me 1 second there. And callers, if you're out there at this moment, as I said a while ago, we'll be certainly glad to have your calls so you can talk with the minister and ask the relevant questions. Thank you, Shawn.
Yes, as I was saying, SBAs are now due the end of this month. The dates for the exams, those have been pushed back. I think we are now looking at June, July in terms of those exams. And additionally, the traditional format of the exam papers has changed. Students now more or less will be tested or graded based on a multiple choice paper and the SBAs. Of course, there's still some subject areas which will have an additional component such as the languages, visual arts, and some other subject areas.
Some people are concerned that, mathematics and the sciences could be severely affected in the process. How are we trying to cope with that aspect of the problem? The sciences and mathematics traditionally has given other problems to students, and based on the requirements of science, what are the provisions in terms of coping with those kind of areas? As you mentioned in the languages, some special provisions are to be made.
We are taking those cases as they come along. For example, some teachers have indicated that there might be some aspect of an SBA that they may need to bring students together. We have asked, for example, the number of students. We try to see as much as possible in terms of social distancing, how those students can still be accommodated while allowing for social distancing. If it's a large class, for example, it may mean allowing a particular amount of students to be at, let's say, the school, and then maybe a next day or later in the day, a next set of the students, for example, in so much as teachers are able to provide education virtually, because some teachers have already begun doing that, even without the official start from the Ministry of Education. The students log in for the classes and teachers provide directions, provide education, etc. to the students. So we are therefore mindful that in some situations there are some exceptions which will have to be made, and so we are treating those cases as they come along with the necessary protocols and interventions which are needed.
Okay, before we go into some more questions on the board education matter, in terms of, in number 5, the provisions for the elderly, disabled, those kind of unfortunate folks, what are some of the humanitarian projects which are going on down there?
We are indeed concerned about the elderly persons, and so all efforts are being made to ensure that they are assisted and that they get the care and attention that they deserve. The Ministry of Social Development, for example, has been at the forefront in terms of attending to the needs of those persons. I can also say in terms of a government and in terms of being the Member of Parliament for the constituency, we have distributed a number of care packages to persons within the constituency, of course giving preference and attention to those we consider most vulnerable. The elderly would certainly form part of that group. When we have any particular case of any individual who appears to be having difficulty, we try as best as possible to meet the needs of that particular individual.
A number of measures have been taken at supermarkets, businesses, etc. in this country in the context of the present coronavirus, the COVID-19 virus. Do you foresee that in schools and other facilities a new culture coming about in terms of hand sanitizers, emphasis on personal hygiene and those matters?
I certainly think that there will be in your culture what we now refer to as a new norm. You spoke of the hand sanitizers, personal hygiene. I think there's already a heightened awareness of the importance of those, and so that those things will come part of the everyday life for persons having now lived this particular experience. I spoke earlier about virtual education, for example. I think perhaps we'll be seeing more and more of that, and teachers taking a greater advantage of that rather than tending to think that education must involve the traditional face-to-face method and sitting down in a classroom. What I would also expect coming out of this is that teachers now feel more comfortable in terms of the infusion of ICT within the classroom and using it to teach our children. Children, I'm hoping, would also be more familiar with using those same devices to assist them in terms of the pursuit of their education, whether it is doing research or otherwise. So yes, I foresee that we will have some new norms within our schools. We, for example, in the Ministry of Education, have had discussions about perhaps setting up within different schools classrooms or particular classes where you have virtual education being taught, because I think this has also led to a particular recognition that you never know when you may have the need for such. And so it perhaps now ought to become more of a regular feature in terms of the delivery of education.
So we can foresee, let us say, a math teacher in Keon teaching kids, let us say, in Sadlers or in Sandy Point.
And I do believe that you will see some of that coming out of the virtual education that we are about to embark upon. That you may have a teacher who may not normally have been teaching a particular class, now being able to teach that class at two different students from different schools around the island.
It's rather interesting, something which, I wish I could see be implemented as soon as possible, but then in the context of the COVID-19 virus, a number of things have to be considered but timed in a proper manner. Some people, I guess people have different interests, and they're looking at the future in terms of, well, they're going as far as Carnival and other festivals. So what's the situation on this at the moment?
No decision has been taken on Carnival as yet. However, there are some ideas that we are looking at in terms of Carnival in the event that we have to take a decision to postpone or cancel Carnival for this year. There are some shows, for example, which we have said we may be able to host virtually. So rather than persons getting nothing at all, there is still some possibility that if we move in that particular direction, that some shows still will be staged.
Okay. Another aspect about sports, in terms of the facilities, what have been the recent, upgrades like to playing fields and other facilities?
We have had quite a number of upgrades to playing facilities around the entire island. If you go to Tabernacle at this point in time, you have a pavilion being built there. I think it was on Friday of last week, we got back a contract for the erection of bleachers at the Keon playfield. If you go there, you would also recognize that since the advent of this administration, we have placed modern lighting on that playfield. The same thing was done at the Tabernacle playfield. You come into The Basti area, the tennis courts at Warner Park were resurfaced. You go into the Connery area, the football field over there was regrassed. Currently before Public Works is the documents for the erection of a pavilion on the Connery playing field. Just yesterday I spoke with the Director of Public Works, and they're now in the process of preparing the bill of quantities for that project, and so hopefully it will be going out to tender very shortly.
Of course, we're inviting callers and listeners to call into the program and to make a contribution to the show. So if you're out there and you have a question that you need to get an answer to, you're so welcome to call into the program. Can you continue, Mr. Minister?
Yes. As I was saying, relative to Connery, it's now hopefully very shortly would have the bidding process for that pavilion in Connery. You move to the Boyd's area, where we have built a basketball court there, provided play equipment for the children. We have put in a gazebo, bathroom facilities. On the upper level, the football field has since come into operation, and lights have also been placed on it. The lighting of the virtual play field is now well advanced, and I think within hopefully 2-3 weeks, persons will see new modern lighting at the virtual play field. You go to Sandy Point, we have had 2 brand new tennis courts there. We have built a field house there. We have placed modern lighting, and for the first time, placed lights on the play field in Sandy Point. We have redone the basketball court. We have redone the netball court. We're now in the process of putting a different type of lighting for the basketball and netball court. The materials are on island, and so hopefully that process will begin very shortly. At a number of the basketball courts, we have changed out the rings and the poles to more modern one, those which are adjustable, and also with the using glass and everything in terms of the backboards. So you have halfway tree, got a new basketball court. The netball court was repaved in Challengers. The bleachers which were destroyed by the hurricane, those have been repaired. I mean, there's just so many projects we have undertaken through the sports ministry that I don't even think I've mentioned half of them. You go to St. Peter's, for example, the facilities up there were also upgraded, the court, the pavilion, etc. And I'm sure as I sit here, more of what we have done in terms of the upgrade of sporting facilities will come to mind.
So, in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic and the challenges in general that the Ministry of Education is facing, I mean, are you satisfied that we are on a good path?
I am satisfied that we are on a good path. The Ministry of Education began planning way in advance. And so it's not like we are now in a reactionary mode. We foresaw what was coming, and so in terms of beginning to think about ordering devices, etc., we were way ahead of the curve. So I am of the view that the Ministry of Education is well placed to continue to educate our students in the midst of COVID-19.
Okay, so things are on a proper trajectory.
Yes.
Okay, so wonderful to hear. With the schools, I know schools and other facilities have regular security, but with the schools basically been shut, has the ministry been facing any challenges with people, like vandalism, want to go on the premises for improper purposes and that kind of stuff?
Unfortunately, we have had cases of such vandalism to schools.
Oh,
The security
unfortunate.
officers, though are still expected to be at work, we have provided them with letters of permission from the police, allowing them to be able to go to and from work so that they may continue to safeguard our educational institutions.
And in terms of, break-ins and vandalism, that kind of thing, has there been any challenges in that area?
We have had challenges in that area. One of the more recent cases that we have, interestingly, was at the preschool in Sandy Point, where someone broke in and stole some of the equipment at that particular institution. Of course, the equipment come at a cost to the government. It really, it says something about the thinking, the minds of our people when, in spite of what is happening, you find time to break into a school, you determine that you're going to take the equipment, whether it is you're going to sell them or what, I don't know. You're speaking about a school that caters to one of the most vulnerable groups within our society, and you're also depriving those students of returning to the schools whenever schools are open and being able to function at normal capacity if it is that the government hasn't replaced those pieces of equipment by the time we are able to reopen the schools.
To those students who've been back from Jamaica and in quarantine, has there been any need for any extra support to them, material, psychological, or in any form whatsoever? Or are they pretty much set and comfortable just waiting for that day?
I can't speak to any psychological support which may have been offered to them, and that is a very good and interesting question, and perhaps something that we need to look at. However, we have ensured that they have access to Wi-Fi to internet service because some of the students upon their return is still in classes, and some of them actually had exams scheduled, so we had to ensure that they're able to, whether it is partake in classes or being able to take the exams. In terms of meals for them, the families have been asked to assist with providing meals for them, in particular, I think, lunch and breakfast. And the government, I think, provides dinner for them. On the lockdown days in particular, the government provides all of the meals for those students.
Oh, interestingly, and it's so wonderful to hear that even though they're in quarantine, there's that limited amount of interaction with parents to give that kind of emotional support and make eye contact.
I know that when the parents do go there, because of course if you're in quarantine, it means that you should have limited contact with persons so that they would drop off the food items and the food items will be delivered to them. However, in this world of our social media, of course, they're able to chat with their parents, whether it is by WhatsApp or by video calls, etc. And tomorrow makes a 1 week since they have been back home. The quarantine hopefully should be about 14 days. And so the time is actually flying, and it's only a matter of time before they will be able to see their parents. I don't suppose that 2 weeks is long, considering the fact that they would have been in Jamaica for months and would not have seen their parents and their loved ones during that particular period of time.
Well, one of the good things we have with the time flies, and like I said, by this time to next week, they'll be looking forward to sunrise and you're getting home. One of the things people have been concerned about and have been asking questions about in terms of the government support to private schools.
The government has been providing support to private schools, just as students and parents of the public schools have been affected, and those parents have expressed the need for help from the government, so too the parents of students attending the private schools have expressed a need. The government understands the needs that they have expressed. This Team Unity administration is a caring administration. Hence, when we began looking at the eventualities, we also would have surveyed students attending the private schools to ensure that they too can continue their education. If we have some students being able to receive an education and others lagging behind in terms of their education, at the end of the day, the entire federation will be affected by it. We don't want to leave any single student behind, and so we're catering for all students. For example, when I spoke of the schools meals earlier, there's some who may think that because a child is going to a private school, that parent may be able to afford to give the child a lunch. But now you have parents from both the parents of students from both private and public schools being out of employment, etc. And as such, you may very well have some parents of students attending private schools who have sought the schools meals for their children. And I can attest to that. It has crossed my mind that just yesterday while at Sandy Point Primary, I would have seen a student who I happen to know. She attends a private school in Bastille, but she was there collecting lunch for herself and her siblings.
Oh, it's certainly very remarkable and so wonderful. Well, what we're going to do at this moment, we're going to take a break and wet our throats, and it's just pretty much halftime or thereby, and sad is going to go. You know, since we're here, we're going to get a song from Sandy Point to motivate people in the present situation, you know. I guess your former cohort, Eric Saunders, Lord Anything. You know, nice chap who was passed, but who has left a very sound message for citizens and Navisians, you know. Sergeant, you got us?
Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. These words of inspiration should be adopted by you and me in a quest to build a better country. We need to be patriots of this land, whether we support government or opposition. No need to sit and complain while your country going down the drain, for we will surely feel the pain if we wantonly destroy our country's good name. Put a hand and help out your country. I'm appealing to everybody. If you really love this island, come and show your patriotism. Our country need a commitment from me and you. That is not difficult to do. All hands on deck, I insist. We must be patriotic, true patriots. Where are you? Come out from hiding. Your country need you. Ah yeah, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. A true patriot shows a sense of national pride for his flag, his people and country. He's willing and ready to serve in any capacity to continue his forefathers' legacy. A true patriot respects his national song. When it's been played, he always stands firm and strong. He serves his country dearly, contributing unselfishly. He knows knows his efforts are never in vain, as he toils and toils to promote his country's name. Put a hand and help out your country. I'm appealing to everybody. If you really love this nation, jump up, show your patriotism. Our country need a commitment from me and you. That is not difficult to do. All hands on deck, I insist. We must be patriotic, true patriots. Where are you? Come out from hiding. Your country needs you. Ah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's make a pledge of allegiance to our country. Be courageous when faced with adversity. No matter the situation, be proud to be Kitishan, working as one to beautify this island. Be optimistic, strong and positive. Stick to your plan and reject the negative. And when the going gets tough, hold straight and never give up. Love your land, guard it zealously. Rejecting those who vandalize the country. Put a hand and help out your country. I'm appealing to everybody. If you really love this island, time to show your patriotism. Our country need a commitment from me and you. That is not difficult to do. All hands on deck, I insist. We must be patriotic, true patriots. Where are you? Come out from hiding. Your country needs you. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Ale, 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 ale. Amade, da, da, oh, da, da, da. Put a hand and help out your country. I'm appealing to everybody. If you really love this nation, come and show your patriotism. Our country need a commitment from me and you. That is not difficult to do. All hands on deck, I insist. We must be patriotic, true patriots. Where are you? Come out from hiding. Your country needs you. Come out and make a positive contribution to your country. Be a true patriot.
Yes, indeed, my dear folks, that was the late Eric Saunders, the Lord Anything, with some very sound words for us as a people in a critical time as this when all hands should be on deck and everyone, be found to be making an effort to take St. Kitts and Nevis through, a very unique and a very trying time. I am certain that many people who are listening, who live in today, would have never thought that they would have to go through an experience of this nature. But the essential factors are in place, and they're very simple, And over and over again, various persons and institutions are asking that we pay attention to matters of basic hygiene. Wearing that face mask, washing hands with an alcohol-based, 70% based hand sanitizer, social distancing, all which are very basic and simple, rather inexpensive measures. And one of the things our people have to pay attention to is that we have to look at the historical. Welcome call. Welcome to Perspectives. Welcome to the Table of Thought. Have we lost that caller, Sarge? Okay. We're hoping that they can call back and join us. But historically, these pandemics have been known to have second peaks. And people, after the first wave, tend to get rather comfortable and relax their guard. And in the second episode, a number of people become affected and, of course, have to suffer the consequences. So as a people, when we have the free days for shopping and for doing business, kindly adhere to those very simple requests, very simple instructions, and we have to be very disciplined in an effort to cope with this COVID-19 virus and to protect each of us from the consequences. What we've heard tonight from the Minister of Education is that the country has already incurred tremendous expenditure in education and health and other areas, all in the effort to provide support and, of course, ultimately, which is so fundamental and so very basic and important, the saving of lives in St. Kitts and Nevis. And our people, we have to be patient, follow instructions, and, of course, listen to the authorities. But, Mr. Minister, I have to tell you of an effort by a citizen down there in our neck of the woods in number 4. One Mr. Austin Coker. He has offered services to students right across the board in terms of typing. The SBA is working on their various projects. Would you like to comment on that?
Yes. I was at ZIZ one evening when Mr. Coker would have called in and said that he is offering that service to all students within the Old Road community. I commended him, and again, I take the opportunity to do so. He and I have since spoken, and he told me that quite a number of students have been taking advantage of the offer. He said if any student within the community makes the complaint that he or she isn't able to get SBA's etc. printed, it is because that student doesn't want to take advantage of the free service that he is offering. COVID-19 has brought out, I think, some of the model behavior amongst many of our citizens. Regular citizens here in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis have come to the fore and have offered assistance in so many different ways. This morning, for example, I had a message from a farmer from my constituency, a lady who we call Busy. She indicated to me that she has provided a number of items from her farm to the school's meals to be able to assist it with providing the lunches for our students. She too must also be commended, and the many other citizens who have come forward and who have been patriotic, who recognize that in the midst of this, pandemic. We all must be our brothers and sisters' keeper, and they have opened up, whether it is the checkbooks, whether it is the kitchens, whether it is the business places, etc., their homes, to provide assistance to persons.
Welcome, caller. Welcome to Perspectives.
Good evening, Mr. Warner. Good evening, Honorable Committee.
Good evening, sir.
Pleasant good evening to you.
Yeah, a question, right? If the schools are reopened before, we fully recover, this virus are fully gone from the country, right? How would the social distancing be practiced or managed inside the schools? More so like in the classrooms, and then like on the outside when you have the recess break, knowing that especially the primary schools where those younger kids are more like the playing type and stuff like that. How would that be managed? If you all have looked at it, what is it you all are looking at in terms of having them do, to kind of practice the social distancing?
Thank you, Carl, for that question. I can say that to date, we have worked out the protocols of such. We are in the process, however, of looking at what some of the recommended best practices would be. You would note that around the world, even some of the most prestigious universities are still closed. And I suppose part of the reason is that these schools are also trying to determine what the best practices would be, what protocols they would have to put in place to accommodate the students, and as you indicated, to ensure that there is a social distancing. We are also being guided by the Ministry of Health that would assist us not only in terms of developing those protocols, but in terms of indicating to us what is deemed to be the safest time for us to reopen the schools, taking all factors into consideration. Dr. Warner himself would have just spoken to the fact that in some instances, when you have these pandemics, you have a second wave of them. And so that is something that we have to guard against. For example, whenever a decision is taken to open the ports of entry here in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, that in itself would come with the risk of perhaps persons who are affected with COVID could enter our borders. As we know, most of the cases that we have had thus far are persons who would have traveled overseas. So these are all situations that we need to look at in coming up with whatever protocols we finally decide upon.
Hello, are you there? Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Minister, and in responding to those concerns from that caller. Well, you mentioned this very fine person down there, number 5. You said her name is Dizzy.
Busy, yes.
And her contribution to the school meals program. And in fact, it would be wonderful if other farmers, come out and put in their pitchfork and contribute to the school meals program. While we're in that matter about the school meals program, has it caused the ministry to incur any extra expenses?
The schools meals program?
Yeah, in the context of, the COVID-19 virus, kids at home and having to take meals to them.
I suppose it hasn't, so, because normally...
We'll take the caller. Welcome, caller. Welcome to Perspectives.
Good night to Charles, Dr. Warner.
Pleasant good evening.
To the Honorable Shawn Richard.
Good evening.
Dr. Warner, I don't know, but the phone line them seem like they're giving some kind of problem, because I calling, and other people telling me they're calling, and nobody's taking up the phone.
Yeah, we've been wondering about that.
The computer inside in blinking that to see, nobody seen that the phone ringing. But anyway, Mr. Richard,
Yes, sir.
now my question to you. Now these children going to get their lesson online, virtual teaching, right? Now, how effective it will be online, especially sometimes when you got people doing work on the internet and, internet occupying all over. Because even sometimes, me and all on the phone, and paying internet and you can't get internet. So I want to know how effective it will be that these children won't get a learning, because sometimes when you get the internet gone, you got to shift in and the radio station them sometimes. That you try to tune into certain things and then you got internet failing. So I just want to know how effective it will be that the children then could learn and the line. And the next thing again, the dark high school, because it's like a song and dance out there that it seems like you're all in what you're doing and all these things coming from the opposition, and you all in the decision about the high school because you all in plan to put the school there again because of whatever contamination going to be the water. So I just wanted to let the people know that this school is going to start whenever you're going to start, because I know that you can't start now because the problem right now in the world with this coronavirus. And I just wanted to highlight again that the people are more people know that the basketball school will be still. Anyway, I'll continue to listen.
Thank you, caller. To respond to your first question as to how effective virtual education will be, bearing in mind that sometimes we have issues with internet connectivity, that is indeed a valid concern. We are hoping that as best as possible that those interruptions, those connectivity issues are minimized and there is as little disruption as possible. It is something which, of course, we cannot prevent, and sometimes you will have, failures in terms of technology. That is always one of the risks, but in the event of that happening, of course, just like anything else, because a child can show up at a school tomorrow and the teacher is sick, and so because of that, you may have some disruption in terms of that child being taught the particular lessons which were planned for that day. It doesn't, however, mean that the child doesn't eventually get the benefit of those classes. Similarly, with virtual education, if one recognizes that internet connectivity has in some way affected the ability to deliver a particular class, it means that those classes would have to be rescheduled to a different date. Let us take our minds back to a few years ago when you had that hurricane which would have disrupted education in a number of the neighboring islands, and even here in St. Kitts and Nevis, where there are two, the schools might have been closed. Eventually, those students had to resume their education, and similarly, if we have such situations, of course, you try to mitigate against them, but you put plans in place to ensure that the students aren't disadvantaged permanently. On the matter of the second question that you would have posed about the Bastille High School, I can honestly say that the Bastille High School, the new Bastille High School, is still very much a priority of this administration. Just last week, for example, some of the stakeholders involved in that project, Public Works, Ministry of Education, and other persons convened a meeting to discuss some aspects of the construction of the Bastille High School. Coming out of that, we have had some correspondence back and forth in an attempt to settle certain matters. In essence, negotiations are still very much underway relative to the construction itself of the Bastia High School. We have now passed the phase in terms of drawings, etc. So the phase that we are now at is in terms of negotiations relative to the construction itself of the Bastia High School. It has been a long process indeed in coming, but I suppose part of it is the nature of the project itself and the many different stages involved in the process of the construction of the school.
Thank you, caller. Thank you for your question. There's a matter that has been going over my brain as we are in the discussion, Mr. Minister. Do you think we're going to see virtual education playing a more active part in the regular process of educating our children?
I did allude to that earlier,
Yeah.
that perhaps it is one of the norms which will come out of this pandemic, and bearing in mind that we have now engaged a number of our teachers in delivering education online, and also considering that students will now be engaged in that particular process.
Yeah, you know, one of the things I'm thinking about as we speak of virtual education is it going into a new culture of possibly summer school for students? Yeah.
It is very possible. It is very much possible. I can't say definitively at this point in time that it would happen, but it is a distinct possibility.
And some people have been asking the question is they wonder if, you know, with the coming of COVID and the effect on education, if there might be some kind of demand for more funds be put into education. Are we seeing that challenge, the possibility of it?
I can't say at this point in time. Let me say, however, that in terms of being able to provide the devices to the children, being able to provide internet connectivity to the homes, we were assisted by the Universal Service Fund with approximately $1.5 million, I think it is, and that would have assisted us with undertaking that aspect of the project. However, if schools are going to be closed for a prolonged period of time, as is the case now, it also means that there are certain costs which would have been associated with the opening of schools that the ministry would not necessarily have at this point in time. It's certain materials, etc., that you would have to provide for the efficient running of our schools. Those we are not providing. The early childhood centers, for example, those are closed. The government has been providing $50 subvention for each child, whether in a private or a public center. With the schools being closed, that subvention isn't being paid. So it means that you have some possible savings there that you can now use in the pursuit of virtual education. Your everyday supplies to your schools, such as your cleaning items, for example, that has been minimized. The school buses that would be transporting our children to school, the diesel, the maintenance cost of the school buses, etc. Those costs would be minimized at this point in time. So there might be some savings on some heads that you're now able to reallocate in the pursuit of virtual education.
Okay, that's quite understandable that, you know, some funds would be transferred or reallocated. How do you see the future in terms of the integration of agriculture into education and food security in terms of, you know, teaching for students?
The integration of agriculture is going to be critical. Of course, agricultural science is being taught within our schools. I am hopeful that there would be a greater awareness, however, amongst the citizens and in particular amongst our students in terms of the importance of agriculture and being more self-sustainable as a nation. That interest, we would want to see it being transformed to more and more students taking up agricultural science within our schools, be it at the secondary level in particular or at the tertiary level. We need more persons to go into farming, and if more persons are able to go into farming in terms of the food import bill, that would make a substantial difference. Persons need to see farming as a viable career option. The government has been offering support to farmers. We have made more land available for farming at this point in time. And farming perhaps should be one of the sectors that persons feel more comfortable with at this stage, as opposed to the hotel industry, for example, which has been affected. In the event of a hurricane, you see the direct impact on the hospitality sector, on the tourism industry. Plus, I think they all go hand in hand, and being able to provide more locally grown food to the hospitality sector.
There's something that has been on our mind for quite a while. 10 years from now, some new students may not have heard much about this present experience. Do we see we can integrate the COVID-19 experience to some extent in the curriculum to equip our people and students for this kind of situations?
I think there will be, even if it's not officially implemented as part of the curriculum. It has been an experience which has impacted many of us, an experience that I think we will be able to relate to in so many different ways. And as such, I think teachers in particular will be speaking about it. I think coming out of COVID-19, you will have many different case studies being undertaken. It is at the forefront of the media at this point in time. And as such, even if you don't want to hear about it, you hardly can avoid it, as we look around and we see the differences within a society. I think that in itself has generated interest, it has generated talk, it has generated educational discussions. And there are some subject areas such as health, for example, that when you begin to look at personal hygiene, for example, I think COVID-19 will become a real example as to the importance of personal hygiene. It will become a real example in terms of how diseases are spread, how to go about avoiding them, etc.
Okay, thank you so very much. As Minister of Culture, what are your comments, in terms of the role Calypsonians and other artists are playing in terms of educating people and dealing with the present COVID-19 pandemic?
Calypsonians have always been at the forefront in terms of bringing issues to the fore, addressing issues in a particular way that perhaps you and I may try to address it in one way but don't get the same attention as a Calypsonian who's able to put some sort of words to it that capture persons, that make persons see things differently, envision things differently, engrave certain meanings within the psyche of persons. Calypso has that ability. You have had quite a number of persons thus far who have helped to spread some of the good practices to help to flatten the curve of COVID-19 taken to the airwaves. Persons have readily accepted those messages. I think we're going to see many calypsos speaking to different aspects of COVID-19. And when I say different aspects, so many different aspects of it. Some perhaps will sing about the healthcare aspect of it. Some will sing about the social aspect of it, the experiences of some persons being locked away within their homes and with their significant others. You have heard the reports from the police that many of the complaints that they are now getting would be about domestic issues. And so I suppose you will hear some calypsos about that. You will hear calypsos about the new norm and persons in there wearing their mask and all the other different aspects of COVID-19. The Calypsonians, I think they have an important role to play, especially in terms of bringing some of the positive messages about COVID-19. But I think more importantly, in terms of how we live as a society, how we relate as a society, and how COVID-19 would have impacted some of those norms, how COVID-19 perhaps have helped to bring out some of the best practices within society and some of the messages relative to what we should be doing going forward.
Any examples of these Calypsonians artists at the moment that you think you might want to say a big thank you to? Caller, welcome to Perspectives. Welcome to the Table of Thoughts. We're so glad to have you.
Yes, good evening again. Mr. Richards, in the year 1970, right, to be more specific, we had a disaster here in the Federation, I think it's needed. They call the Christina disaster. I don't know if he was around that time.
No, I wasn't.
He was not.
Okay. All right. And we had I think like 200 or over 200 persons would have perished in that disaster.
249 or thereby.
You know? And that disaster would have kind of crippled, not in terms of maybe the economy, but in terms of people, loved ones, and the feelings, and it stayed with the kind of people and stayed with the federation for a long period of time. Up to going on nowadays ongoing ceremony that they would have maybe yearly when that time comes around and stuff like that, right? Now we are having another disaster. And now this one is a pandemic, and the government would have taken some steps. One of the steps is to introduce a curfew, right? In your view, do you think the curfew would have helped or stop any major outbreak, in terms of having a lot of people getting more infected with the disease? Because up to now we still only have 15 cases that is confirmed, and I think 12 out of that 15 they would have fully recovered. But do you think that the curfew would have did what the government set out to do in terms of slowing down or trying to stop the people from getting infected, in your view?
Thank you, Carlo. I do believe that the curfew has helped tremendously in terms of slowing and stopping the spread of COVID-19. Let us recognize that a majority of the persons within the Federation who were affected with COVID-19 didn't exhibit any symptoms of COVID-19. Therefore, you have the very real possibility that some of those persons would have infected others with COVID-19 quite innocently. I have known of some of the cases of COVID-19. Some of these are persons who work in various different institutions that many of us would frequent, would do business with, and we could have gone to any of these particular institutions, interacted with these persons, not knowing that they are infected, and pick up COVID-19. The curfew has allowed the persons to shelter at home, thereby minimizing the risk of persons coming into contact with persons who have been affected by COVID-19. Let me give a very real example. I personally decided to take a test for COVID-19 upon discovering one of the persons who had been affected by COVID-19. And I decided to do it because that I would have come into contact with that particular individual very innocently. I'm trying as best as possible not to give too much details. And so for me, it was a real possibility. And this is some place that I would have frequented. And if it wasn't for the curfew, I definitely can say that it's a place that I would have continued to frequent, not knowing that an individual who I would interact with is affected with COVID-19. Fortunately for me, my test came back negative. But even if I had been affected, it means that I could have affected many other persons in terms of transmitting COVID-19 to many other persons. Hence, I am convinced that the curfew has helped in terms of slowing down COVID-19, and that is why we have only had 15 cases of COVID-19 to date.
Yeah, just before the caller made his inputs in terms of this question, we were looking at if you could cite an example of the calypsonians or artists who have gone out of the way to, provide a song or an act or something to help the general public in terms of coping with the. Yes, Carl, welcome to Perspectives. Welcome to the Table of Thought.
Yeah, good night again. Yeah, Brother Richard, I must commend you and the government to wholeheartedly bring those children here on behalf of the responsibility government. We must commend that. And that is where a working government is all about, and that is where a caring government is all about. You understand? Because you all uplift the border for those children to come in. But Mr. Richard, I talked to the Prime Minister about it. All kind of question is asking on the brief in the afternoon time about some American airlines going to come in such a time. Some cruise lines supposed to go to St. Lucia, go to this place, go to that place, and then they're going to come to St. Kitts. But I tell the Honorable Prime Minister, to be truthful, I would like to see the border open up right now. We got to be careful because what's happening in America right now, I made to understand a lot of deportees, they're putting back on plane, coming back in St. Kitts when they open the borders. And we got to be very, very careful. You understand? Because if deportees don't come back here, they will send them back here. Because I made to understand they send some back in Jamaica. That before the border closed. And when they come, we can't get them control, and they go up and down and affect others who out there, and then everything rolls back up again. So we got to gradually do things. I believe right now that in the next 2 more weeks from now, I believe that the country could open up and the business place could continue to do whatever they got to do. But I believe that how the situation be right now, I do not think our borders could open up right now. Let the borders open up and bring food and bring whatever cargo they're bringing. Not to bring passengers right now to our country, like human beings from different places, because right now, I tell you plainly, I cannot afford, and this country cannot afford, because you see our economy going right now. We got to pay people and who are working. So I want to commend the government once more time again to this drastic move they make, especially with the package. The ministers don't they criticize, you know the guy criticize. No problem, there is opposition. And that's what the opposition is all about, to criticize. But the ordinary man and woman and the majority of people in this country see this government is doing the best that they could ever done for anybody in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, when the other government in the world is doing. But you all have a wonderful night. God bless.
Thank you so much, caller. And we're just asking if you'd like to cite or thank any examples of the persons who've come out in some or other avenue in this challenge against the COVID-19 virus.
I am not going to single out any individual. I don't want anyone to take offense that his or her name wasn't mentioned. As such, I extend a very general thank you to all of the different Calypsonians and other individuals who are not Calypsonians, who would have put pen to paper, who would have lent their voices in terms of taking the message of COVID-19 to the people of the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis.
As Minister of Education and Deputy Prime Minister, any word you have for the churches in terms of the role they've played in trying to cope with this COVID pandemic and challenge?
The churches have indeed played a major role. In the first instance, the churches have done an excellent job in terms of appealing to its membership to lift their voices in prayer to God for sparing us from the worst of COVID-19. And I think indeed God has answered the prayers of our wonderful and God-fearing people here in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. The churches have also played a major role in terms of spreading the message of COVID-19 in the first instance to the membership of the churches, who in turn would have taken that message to other persons within society. Even before government had taken a decision to put the statutory rules and orders in place that govern social distancing and the closure of churches, etc. And many of the churches had already taken that particular decision, having recognized how easy this particular disease, this virus can spread. Hence, I think the churches have been a responsible pillar within the society, not only in terms of invoking the presence of God, but in terms of helping to spread the message about COVID-19. And so we must say thanks to all of the religious leaders and the religious community for accepting that responsibility and for taking that leadership role.
I'm sure you must have touched on it during our discussion. You know, any special thank you for the nurses, the police, the EMS, NEMA, and all those frontline workers?
Those workers who we consider to be essential workers, they have done an excellent job to date. They also, while at the forefront, have helped tremendously with flattening the curve for COVID-19. They have been working tirelessly to ensure the safety of the citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis. I don't think financially they can be compensated, but I think as a society, we owe them a debt of gratitude for the role that they continue to play. They're constantly on the job, constantly reminding us about COVID-19. You take NEAC, for example, you have persons sleeping there overnight. Every day we have the briefings coming to us, indicating to us the state of COVID-19 here in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, comparing it to what is happening worldwide, bringing new and relevant information to us. And I don't think that we can be ungrateful for such. As I said, they have all played a tremendous role. You see the police officers going from community to community on the streets every day, trying to reinforce the rules of social distancing, trying to reinforce the curfew, all for the safety of the citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis. Unfortunately, there are some persons who do not appreciate the work of the police, the work of the frontline workers, and so rather than assisting, they have sought to cause mischief. But I am hopeful that at some point in time, those persons would reflect, and even if they don't say publicly thanks to those individuals, that privately they will do so, and they will give thanks to God Almighty for the work that these persons have been doing.
Something sort of crossed my mind I'll put to you. As Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Education, Culture, Sports, etc., do you find this responsibility in the context of the COVID-19 virus one you really enjoy and you're happy that you can play a responsible role?
Yes, I do. And I think that God places each of us in a particular position at a particular point in time because he feels that we are best suited to be there at that point in time. It has been an educational experience for me, but that educational experience, I think, has equipped me and has led me to be able to assist many of our people during this time of COVID-19. It is a time when so many of us are confused. It is a time when so many of us are out of a job, and so we are looking to other persons for assistance. We look to other persons to inspire us, to give us hope. We look to persons for leadership in the midst of the pandemic. I am happy that I have been part of that effort. I am happy to be part of this government that has responded tremendously well, not only in terms of providing leadership, but in terms of providing relief to persons. The government has provided persons with financial assistance in so many different aspects, whether it is the $500 monthly PAP, whether it is those who are getting assistance from Social Security, the businesses which have now recognized a decrease in their corporate tax or the unincorporated tax for a next set of business depending on how you are registered. You, of course, we spoke earlier to some of the initiatives being spearheaded by the Ministry of Education, the students coming home from Jamaica, the Schools Meals program, the devices being provided for our students. In the sphere of agriculture, we have assisted persons and so many different aspects. I mean, in some cases, when the Prime Minister would have announced the relief measures, the economic stimulus plan, some of these measures were not contemplated and were not introduced at that particular point in time. But as we began listening to persons, as we began recognizing the concerns of persons, we have had to put additional mechanisms in place to assist individuals. And I am happy that for the majority of persons, they continue to say thanks to the government of St. Kitts and Nevis for providing this much needed assistance.
Well, thank you very much. There's something which, people have been asking, and I'll put it to you at this moment. I know our Nevision brothers and sisters are quite capable in handling their own affairs, but in terms of the level of cooperation, coordination between the two countries, what can you... Caller, welcome to Perspectives. Are you there? I was saying, we know our compatriots over there in Nevis are quite capable of handling their own affairs, but what is the level of, is there any level of coordination and cooperation between the two islands in the education and the way forward, and how do we cope with this matter in the present scenario?
There has been a very high level of cooperation between both St. Kitts and Nevis. Most of the programs which are currently being offered in St. Kitts are mirrored in the island of Nevis, perhaps with the exception of one or two. One which comes readily to mind is that of the schools meals program, and that is because Nevis, of course, has its own arrangements in terms of providing schools meals to the children of Nevis. Hence, I am not aware that Nevis has put that particular program in place. Maybe in terms of some of the economic realities, they might be different in Nevis for the parents, but perhaps it is something that the Ministry of Education over there is also looking at. However, the federal government continues to give support in Nevis to ensure that whatever challenges there are in Nevis, that those challenges are managed and assisted with in a similar fashion as we have here in St. Kitts and Nevis. The stimulus package, for example, that covers both St. Kitts and Nevis. It is not a matter that persons in St. Kitts, for example, are able to make the claims from Social Security, because Social Security is a federal entity for both St. Kitts and Nevis.
Okay, thank you so very much. That it's so good to hear that there's been some cooperation. So there's a caller. Hello, welcome to Perspectives.
Yes, good evening.
Thank you very much for calling.
Honorable Shawn,
Good
the
evening,
government
sir.
would have brought two pieces of legislation to the Parliament in recent time, right? One last year, the bill that would give the power anyone who speaking or is prime minister, that they could only do so for 2 terms, right? And the other one recently, I think, was the bill, the last bill there in the House, the emergency sitting side of the bill. What's that name was again? I think it's the emergency bill or something like that, to that effect, that the correct wording or name for it.
We know what you mean.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, right. A question to you. If you was on the opposite side, that's in opposition, would you have supported those bills? The first one, the one with for the 2 terms of prime minister and a person to be prime minister. If you would have supported that bill, the reason for you to support that bill, is it because you yourself at one time would want to be prime minister, or you think it's a good bill, a good bill, and the same thing for the other one that I asked about. Would you have support them because you think they are good bills? You want to be prime minister, or you think they are good pieces of legislation? That's my question.
Thank you, Carla. I think the first bill that you referenced, the term limits for the Prime Minister, that bill goes beyond personal ambition. And I would have made several different points during the debate on that piece of legislation. Term limits, for example, have been accepted to help to stem corruption within government, especially from persons who are at the head. I would have referenced in particular the current Prime Minister of Italy, I think, who is currently facing charges before the court, and that particular case is supposed to be coming up recently. You have had a number of journalists who have written on that particular case and expressed the view that if it is that if they had term limits, then perhaps some of the transgressions that he has been accused of would not have been committed. He has been in office for quite a number of years now. Most persons are of the view that when you sit in such a powerful position for quite a number of years, you then begin to think and to feel that the country is yours and you can do whatever it is you feel like. It also helps in terms of stagnation of ideas, because sometimes when you're in a position for so long, you become stagnated in terms of bringing different ideas, different policies to the fore. And so you give someone else the opportunity after 2 terms to sit in that position, to get different viewpoints coming forward from persons. In terms of younger persons who have an interest in politics, you help to foster that climate whereby they feel they have a better chance, a better opportunity to aspire to political office and to aspire to be the Prime Minister, because they know that no one individual can be there for more than 2 terms. If you take St. Kitts and Nevis, for example, we note that one of the reasons why you had the fallout between the current and former Prime Ministers and former Prime Minister is that the current Prime Minister felt like he was being stunted. He wasn't being given the opportunity to become Prime Minister, because the former Prime Minister not only felt that St. Kitts and Nevis had become his, but in terms of giving other persons the opportunity, apparently he has this feeling that only he alone has been given the skills and the ability to lead the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, despite the fact that he would have bankrupted the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. Those are all valid perspectives that we need to bear in mind. And as I said, those were posited by me during the debate, and those are principles that I believe in. And as such, had I been on the opposition bench, I would have supported the particular piece of legislation, not necessarily because of personal ambition, but in looking at what is best for the country, what is best in terms of getting that skill set, that pool of ideas, in terms of persons leading the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis and taking the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis forward. You asked about the legislation pertaining to the state of emergency. Similarly, I supported it. We are facing a pandemic. The Constitution as it is would have only allowed for a state of emergency up to 21 days. Not knowing whether you would have had more cases, and we still don't know if we are going to have more cases. It was a prudent thing to do to ensure that legislation is there to cover the government in terms of putting curfews in place, in terms of putting certain regulations in place, not in the interest of the government, not in the interest of the individual members of the parliament, but in the best interest of all of the citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis. The question was asked earlier about the curfew and whether or not the curfew has assisted with flattening the curve. The curfew has come out of the state of emergency. The state of emergency allowed the government to put that particular regulation in place. We see how it has been helpful. And as you look around the world, you recognize that what we have done here, it is the same thing which has been done in a number of other countries, whether it is in the region or outside of the region. We haven't done anything illegal, but we have done what is in the best interest of the citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis. If after a period of a month, 2 months, we feel that the state of emergency, that it can be repealed, the resolution can be repealed, then we go back to Parliament and the particular legislation is repealed. So that when you hear persons making the argument that there is some sort of ulterior motive, that is absolutely rubbish.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. And we're pretty much at that point in time, but two things before you go, I have to correct you on something you said, and maybe you need to put a modification to it, When you said Sandy Point is where the best be.
It is.
How about you add to that where the best come from?
Well,
my mother was born in Sandy Point.
Your mother was born in Sandy Point, but she left Sandy Point? Or you're trying to claim your roots to Sandy Point, despite the fact that you're not living there at this point in time?
I don't have to claim roots to Sandy Point. I have roots in Sandy Point.
You have roots
you
have children in Sandy Point also.
Claim what is your own.
You have children. Well, and that is what makes you, a good doctor and a good radio host and all of the good things that you are.
And a good fisherman.
And a good fisherman.
But as we're closing, on a serious note, you're having a special thanks, you're in your ministry, the people at the different tiers in your ministry, their performance and contribution in the present context of the COVID-19 virus and the needs of education?
I think the whole ministry has come together as a team to handle the effects of COVID-19 and in providing a solid response to ensure that the education sector continues to thrive during COVID-19. Hence, I say thank you to all of the staff within the Ministry of Education. Of course, there are some persons who have taken leadership roles in terms of bringing different segments of the team together to come up with some particular plans, programs, etc. Some of the persons who come readily to mind, the Permanent Secretary, Mr. Hodge, Dr. Neva Pemberton, Dr. Tricia Esdell, the Personnel Officer, Ms. Stacy Gums, my personal assistant who has been there.
Just a moment. Stacy Gums is the one who gives the sign language?
No, that is Miss Christmas Jacobs.
Oh, Christmas, yeah.
And her, of course, she has been doing an excellent job at NIAC every day in terms of ensuring that those who are hearing impaired, that they're still in tune with what is happening. You have the staff from the Education Planning Division, the education officers. You have Patricia Isle Caesar, who in particular within the last couple of days, because she has oversight over schools' meals, has been very much involved in ensuring that that aspect of it has come to fruition. You have Leon Williams, and he and his team, even before yesterday, when we resumed the schools' meals program, they had been assisting and still continue to assist NIAC with the provision of breakfast and lunch. You have the team over in Nevis, Pierce Barrett, Miss Claxton, the education officers over there. You have Maria Crawford, who heads the media unit within the Ministry of Education, who has been doing a tremendous job in terms of getting out our messages, and of course her team, which has been assisting her. The thing about calling names is when you begin to call one, you run the risk of not mentioning a name and someone feels offended. You have Christopher Herbert, who is in charge of the EMIS department. And so in terms of the aspect of the rollout of the devices, etc., he is a key player in terms of that. I mean, so many different persons. As I said from the start, I want to thank the entire staff of the Ministry of Education. Melvin Basu, the Assistant Secretary responsibility for finance. I mean, almost every day he has to be there, whether it is the assistants to the students, ensuring that schools meals has the money to be able to provide the lunches, coordinating so many aspects of the financial.
So in essence, you're so very thankful and you put in tremendous value on the efforts of all the people at different tiers in the Ministry of Education.
You have put it quite eloquently, so thank you.
Callers, tonight we thank Mr. Shawn Richards, our Minister of Education, Sports and Culture, who has taken time out to come on the show Perspectives to be at the table of thought and to enlighten and deliver information to the general public on the whole. And indeed, we say a very warm thank you for you taking time to come here. And as we leave tonight, we're going to look for some inspirational music, and we're going to turn to a guy called Ken Lazarus from Jamaica. And the show Sarge is ready with us. That song, Hail the Man, That's Your Brother on the Street. Sarge, are you ready for us?
What would you say to the coming of a brand new day, when the shadows are falling away, even from the eyes of your